back to the second session of a series on activism in Indonesia. Last week, the first session, we talked about movements in the shrinking civil space. We talked about repression, censorship, and all the different challenges that current activist organizations confront. Today, it's rather different issue, but not less important, of course. It's about autonomy and movement infrastructure. It's considered a very important thing because, as we know, now we are entering a different terrain altogether compared to the New Order or even the early days of Reformasi. Different challenges like money is kind of like sources are also very, very limited, and movements or activist groups are kind of like have to think creatively on how to sustain the movement. And we have here two excellent speakers, Mbak Dian Irawati, and she's with the Rujak Center for Urban Studies, and she's been involved in different movements involving neighborhood associations, warga, so citizen groups, and of course, she can share a lot of the ideas like on how she dealt with the issue of autonomy, like how to build an infrastructure basically at the urban level. And the second speaker, the one and only, Adir Ramawan, he is with Ruang Rupa, is a collective of artists and has been there for how many years? 25? Yeah, 26 years now. Still getting strong, and then has been involved in different projects as well. And I think it's also interesting to hear like how artist collectives could actually sustain their work because they are also producing artworks. No, so it's kind of like source of income, whether that works or not. And now they are what I just heard that they have an idea to actually develop a cooperative. Yeah, so a different form of economic organization. So we will hear a lot of things, but this is more like a conversation. So no formal presentation is needed, but we will pose some ideas for, and then back to you. You can come up with questions or share your experiences as well.
Thank you, Bang Pei, for the invitation, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dian Tri Irawati, but you can call me Dian. Currently, I'm the program director at Rujak Center for Urban Studies. So we call ourselves as a think tank. So we do research, but we also do advocacy. For the aim is to promote sustainable and just city. And then in the past, we were established in 2010, and it's been almost 16 years, teenagers now, with all the problems required. So we've mostly focusing on the issue of housing, mobility. Recently, we've been doing research and then actions related with climate change impact. And then in the past, maybe 10 years, more than 10 years, we've also have been collaborating with the marginalized group in the city, which is the urban poor. Therefore, we also work as the what we call ourselves like technical assistants for the urban poor. And we've also focusing on the currently working in secondary cities across Indonesia, because we want to also focusing on how these secondary cities dealing or addressing with the issue of same issues like housing mobility, and particularly because Jakarta has been perceived as like an examples, which is not necessarily correct in terms of of course the scale of these different cities, the infrastructures that they currently have. I mean the governance, the local organizations, the local budget particularly. So we've been now working in Lampung, Semarang, Tegal, Bandung, also collaborating with Surabaya, also with other cities in different countries like in Malaysia, focusing on climate change impact. So in the climate change issue, we've been doing research on the impact of climate change for the coastal communities in Jakarta, and also doing research on the impact of the urban heat for different typology of housing, the vertical and landed housing in 4 cities in Indonesia, 3 cities in Indonesia and 1 city in Malaysia, and recently also focusing for the elderly. So we've also doing research about to start the research on the impact of the urban heat for the elderly in rural and urban areas. And also we've still focusing on the forced eviction. We will have collaborating research with the Birmingham University and one NGO in Addis Ababa to do research on eviction and resistance, collective resistance against eviction. And because our government now have this, um, we're about to launching the biggest, probably, I don't know whether it happens or not, because currently we're still focusing on the 3 words, but but we have another project, big project coming up, which is the giant seawall up to the coastal in East Java. So we've been now reject. Next week we will launch another centers, which is the Center for Coastal Studies Centers in collaborating with the University of Harkat Negeri in Tegal. The idea is to strengthen this network across coastal communities to address these issues of eviction and also the reclamation of the coastal areas in Indonesia.
When you talk about these coastal communities, like what form of organization do they take? Like is it like, I don't know, the citizen group, organisasi warga, or
So I I've been working with this specific group called Urban Poor Network, or what we call JRMK, Jaringan Rakyat Miskin Kota, in Jakarta for the past since 2005. So it's also part of my dissertation research focusing on their grassroots movement. So these are 26 kampungs that organized within this one group called the Urban Poor Network, and they've been, of course, focusing on fighting against eviction, but mostly the vision is to have the secure tenures for the kampungs that has been established since 1970s, but still having issues on illegal land title because there's no like clear papers on that. So there are many strategies that have been enforced by this movement. This part of my dissertation, which I call repertoire of strategies. Yeah, and then how they carefully thought what kind of different strategies that you can implement depends on political opportunity, right? Who's the leader of Jakarta? Like currently, it's yeah. So I mean, like there's no breakthrough, but there's also not really like a threat yet. But recently, he's been back to the way Jakarta has been organized in 2000, early 2000, which is like evictions of street vendors, and this is something that the movement have been also addressing. But mostly now they're still focusing on how to secure the right to settle. That's why we've been also working with them, upgrading communities, upgrading kampungs, just trying to provide evidence to the governments that the people actually part of the solutions. So they, with Rujak's architects, they designed the housing, and we built the house through grant, but in the communities they created the cooperative, which run the project, and the money will be written by the household. So it is not like a grant, but the people pay it back like revolving fund. Yeah.
right. But so basically, Rujak is connected to all these different communities, right?
Yes, yes.
And you provide assistance, with legal assistance or political advocacy, and all that, right? So what is the nature of the relationship? I mean, do they come to you because they ask for help, or you just go in and then, yeah, say this is like, how is the connection like?
So the Urban Poor Network is a group that organized by Urban Poor Consortium. So Urban Poor Consortium has
Okay.
been strategically inviting different groups to work with the JRMK. So for example, Rujak has been assigned like 10 kampungs.
Okay.
Another groups like UI have been assigned 3 kampungs, 4 kampungs, and Architecture Sans Frontiers. So most of us are architects who help the Urban Poor network to fight for the kampung upgrading. I mean, helping on the design, but also now we are focusing on doing advocacy on the land reform.
Mm.
Because Jokowi
Yeah.
just issued this law on
Yeah.
land reform. So we've been registering 93 kampungs across Indonesia to acquire the legal title for the land.
Yeah. So because when we talk about the past, back in the 1990s, it was like NGOs were created, and then they would go to whatever community and encourage people at the grassroots level to form like association, organization, etc., etc. So that was the case then. But now it seems that a lot of these communities, like um, just
They're creating the cooperative.
cooperatives by
Yeah,
themselves.
the
So
idea is usually they organize through saving groups, but we realize that they also need legal body
okay,
to help them relate with the government. So now each kampung have a cooperative,
mhm,
and we also now being part of this national advocacy on housing cooperatives. So recently we just collaborating with the Ministry of Cooperative to draft a ministerial decree on housing cooperative.
mhm.
The idea is that how the housing cooperative can become like local developer in their own communities.
Okay,
Yeah, building their own communities.
and this is so far successful. I mean,
Not really like
what are the challenges?
of course the perspective against the urban poor.
Right.
Yeah, the idea that they're not necessarily have the agency, and that's not that much trust. For example, like one of the case that we work together is the Kampung Susun Aquarium.
Mm.
So Kampung Susun Aquarium is a kampung that was evicted back in 2016, and with the advocacy, they managed to have the government to rebuild the kampung into vertical kampungs, and this is the first kampung in Indonesia that managed by its own cooperative. So it's a vertical housing, it's like rumah susun, right? In Indonesia, rumah susun should be under the authority of UPRS, the housing the department.
Mm.
But we ask for it is the people itself who manage the building. So imagining the kampung through cooperative manage the 4 buildings with now is 240 units, and they have to pay like the maintenance and everything. So the cooperative have to be very strategic and also very creative to open business. So they have catering, food business, laundry business, water refill business in order to pay for their maintenance, because they have to pay every month electricity about 20 million rupiah as a collective, but not the units. It's only the collective use, and water is also another 20 million. It is because they don't get subsidized. Because if they only get subsidized if they are if the government label them as rumah susun.
Mhm.
But because they don't want to be as rumah susun,
No.
because rumah susun require the UPRS to organize, right? Then the government force them to pay by themselves the maintenance and everything. So it's already like they've already proven themselves in the past 5 years. They start live in the same in the new rumah susun since 2021. They've now managed to collect around 40 million rupiah
Okay.
as a sinking fund. So they have sinking fund in order to repair, and it happens. And it's really actually a good example, because I've been doing research on the public housing, and in the public housing, if you have problems with the lights, you have to wait for another annual budget,
Right.
right? Like another year to
Yeah.
fix the lamp.
Yeah.
But for them, because it is under
Do it
their,
immediately.
yeah, they will fix it immediately. But it's still like the government does not yet trust them that they have this capacity
The government doesn't.
to govern their own place, which like kampung, right? With
Right.
kampung, they actually govern their own place.
Right. So yeah. Um, in doing all this, Rujak itself, I mean, how do you finance yoga? If I don't
Yeah.
mind, if you don't
I mean,
mind
like
asking.
for all the groups that work with the JRMK, it's more like a pro bono thing.
Pro bono. Okay.
But of course, to able to pay for our community architects, we also have other programs.
Mhm.
So Rujak now have research programs, and also, for example, like when we have these community upgrading programs, we also have allocation for the architects, and now we also like become consultant.
Correct.
So are hired by other organizations to do project with communities, for example. Yeah.
But you receive external funding, but you also generate income.
Yes.
yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Like we selling books, selling clothes, selling ourselves through
Okay.
our mind, of course. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Ade, of course, I mean, your organizations are of a completely different nature, no? Working with artists and all that. But I think there's some similarities in the sense that you also do not rely on external funding and try to create as much as possible, your own source of kind of like income. Can you tell us a little bit about Ruang Rupa and all these different beautiful projects that you've been involved with?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the coming for, and yeah, thank you for the invitation. Yeah, Ruang Rupa started in uh, 2000, in 2000, so it's been run for 26 years, half of my age, really. So I was one of the founder, unfortunately, and yeah, it started like really from the friendship when we were back in the art school, actually, like mid 90s. So it's like really also in the middle of the whole of like student movement and so on, critical thinking, hate the older generations, hate the authority, and so on. Or while this is what happened actually in the art and culture, like it's actually like trying to the necessity of like opening up a space, like opening up space. We started in 2000. Our name is Ruang Rupa, but we started without ruang, actually. So we started without space.
Mm.
So we basically nomadic in the beginning, from our friend's house, friends kos-kosan, and so on. So started, it's actually like really from the necessity how to create a space. This is actually interesting because it's not only for us, but actually also for other people, because we are thinking like the space that it's, or the infrastructure that exists back then, it's either bureaucratic or it's market driven. So I remember when we wrote in 2000 actually, why we start Ruang Rupa, and we sort of like emphasizing like these 2 points. Like first is actually we targeting team back then, Taman Ismail Marzuki, Jakarta Art Center, which we think that it's already to formalize less a space for the young ones, less experimental, and so on, and also that it's actually art become commodified. If I remember that 2 points that we wrote in 2000 and then compare it to now, now it's actually even worse because it's even more bureaucratic. And back then we don't have like monstrous, huge art market like now. Art market now, like for example, like in Jakarta, we have 2 art fair, for example, which is huge, galleries everywhere, and so on and so forth. Like so, being art students, it's totally different now compared to back then. Talking about the motivation of being an artist, or like creating arts, or like doing arts, what art is in your daily life, it's totally different, like 25 years ago or even more. So we started from that, like really start from house to houses. We rent a house after that, and then we patungan. What is it, like patungan? What is in English? Like just like collecting money from our pockets, and then we start renting houses, and then uh, started like really the space which is coming from post domestic, I would call it. Like it's not like art space in the West or in Europe that I know. It's actually usually post industrial, using big warehouse, using like abandoned warehouse, abandoned factories, or even abandoned church, like in Amsterdam, for example. But like in Indonesia, it's really interesting because it's actually we use a lot of house. This is actually talking about infrastructure, talking about institution. I think this is, and then in 2000, around 2009, 2010, I did research on how actually what we call it artist run space that emerge across Indonesia, how they start, and then actually I asked them to send as a sample of research, to send photos of what really represent them, and most of them, if it's not all of them, is actually sending at least like very similar photos. Like one is actually their house where they start or where they activate the space, curates programming, become studios, become also living space. And the other one is actually where they sit and gather in the living room, which is always in the circle. So I was like thinking, like, this is actually the way. Maybe this is the way that we actually think about art institution, which is actually uh, temporary changing, or like or constant changing between the so-called private or domestic and public, always. Because modern art institution, it's really like museum, for example, doesn't have neighbors. It's really alienated from the surroundings. That's what happened with the art schools as well. Like my art school in Jogja, for example, it was like I was studying in EC, Jogja, 92, 97, or 98 or 99 after Reformasi. It was like pushed away from center of the city. So like really detached. Really, I would say strategically, it's like the art school, or like the where the critical thinking like really pushed outside the cities. So that's actually what happened while the so-called artist collective or artist initiative uh, is really start like really in the middle of the neighborhood. So it's uh, become cultural space, a gathering space, become community space as well, where people actually challenge their imaginations all the time within the neighborhood, rather than seeing art institution or art organization as something that, which is also, you can see from the previous generation, that is actually, like it's above the people, or like representing the people. Like I think during the activism in the 90s or like 80s, arts or artists is like voicing the unheard, while after that it's actually part of the people itself. So that's actually one of the really different evolution. Talking about resources, yeah, we always collect resources, which is actually basically from our research. That's what happened in many initiative as a start, and then after that, when it's become grow in a certain neighborhood, it's actually the neighborhood is actually the one that it's support them. So there's this kind of like a resource mapping that is conscious or unconsciously they do, and then they can sort of like collect and orchestrate it in a certain neighborhood. Of course, it's not easy, and then slowly when it's getting a little bit heard, like I think we have like uh, from foreign fundings and also government fundings, and always a project base, which is actually also really it hurts as well. Because it's never, it's when it's project finished and it's finished, and then it's slowly. I think around 2006, 2007, we start what we call it like a unit business. So there's like a cross subsidies from so-called profit to non-profit, which is it's really interesting in my research as well. There's many initiative in different. I think that's also very locally rooted, because that will happen, or like that's possible in Jakarta, because creative industry is here, it's big, and so on. So we can have like a small scraps from it. But what about like friends in different island, like in Kalimantan, for example, or in Sumatra? It's different again. Some are become opening up shops, farms, wedding organizers, wedding photos, wedding videos, and so on. So it's like really thousands of diverse way, actually, from profits to non-profits, and that's actually what still happened until now. And then in 2015, we start the Lumbung model when we gather three collectives, Serum, Grafis Uruhara, and Ruang Rupa. So we share our resources, money, time, energy. So it's like material, financial, and also non-financial. And then we organize or manage together. And then we have majelis until now every month that decide together. So it's like 40, 50 people brainstorm and decide together. So already like more or less 10 years. Yeah, so that somehow works until now.
Interested in this the choice of being among the community or within the community itself. And there's a history to that. I mean, Sangar and all that, like, no. So, and yeah, I think there's a also interesting contrast. I mean, if you look at the professional NGOs, right, working for the people with all these like different projects, etc., etc. But in many cases, they are also alienated from their neighborhood. No, so this what is the challenge? I mean, if you are put in their position, right, what would be the way to kind of like integrate with whatever community that your neighbors like? How do you do that?
I think like the place. I mean, if this is, I will say too. Like first from our research, we found that so many initiative that it's in a certain neighborhood, it's also actually equals with the social class, with also with the neighborhoods, because they're that's how actually affordable for us as well. So there is no class contrast since beginning, and also it's very interesting. It's actually how to sort of like indicate relevancy for us. It's actually, it can be like very intimate, like how you relevant towards your surroundings. So that's actually what like Good School now, for example, that we have now in Jagakarsa. It's become like a community center. In the last weeks, like we have, I think in the last 10 days, there's like 3 events happening. Like one is a hardcore punk gigs, and the second one is experimental music performance, and the last one is pencaksilat gathering, sanggar pencaksilat gathering, using sometimes become wedding place as well. So it's really like I think Jakarta. I mean, like I can talk about Jakarta because yeah, Jakarta doesn't have that myth of art as something that high compared to Jogja, for example. I mean, like if you're an artist in Jogja, I mean, like you meet people and people ask like, "What do you do?" And you said like artist, and they was like, like artist, yeah, great. But here in Jakarta, like, what do you do? Like, I'm an artist. Like, get a job. So in a way, to be in the neighborhood is actually quite, I would say, quite organic. Can be related easily. Then, and we never like brand ourselves as this is like our project. It's like really sort of like super organics, and like more and more it's become like choosing the place or like choosing where you are. It's become sort of like a certain agency as well, because it means also we like to is it recorded?
It's online.
Okay. No, no, no. Yeah, so that's the thing that we actually like really also economically also like like maybe 1/3 or 1/4 of people who work with us, it's actually coming from the surroundings, for example. So it's really like creating a certain economic and knowledge and practice as well. I mean, like we learn from each other as well.
So composition of people involved in this, take different group also matters.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Like how I or we imagine like how art institutions should be. Maybe like how institution as infrastructure, which is actually live and breathe together with the surroundings, rather than like a monument or like museum.
Okay. Before we turn to the audience, another dimension that I like to ask you is this transnational, international dimension of what you are doing. I mean, Ruang Rupa has been involved in different like international projects. Most recently, this Documenta 15 is a big news. Yeah? But you managed to somehow introduce the idea of Lumbung, the barn, to become kind of like an international idea, no? And it's widely accepted by that. Can you tell us a little bit, like, why would people be interested in that kind of practice?
Yeah, in the art world, it's sadly it's pretty dark industry. I think like in the world maybe after drugs and military or weapons industry, I think art will be coming third.
And it's connected as well.
Exactly. And very exploitative, very individualistic, very I would say like very mythical capital industry based. Right. So like sharings, collaboration, collectivism, it's very strange, it's very competitive. So but that's not our experience, right? So like we how we develop and how we coming out from the grassroots. So and it's really also interesting, exactly, and then it's actually it's not that it's actually gone or like that is none. Uh, but actually, after so many years, we found that there's actually so many collectives or so many initiatives which have similar model, sharing model, collaborative and collective models with a certain values. It actually happens in many places, but it's just like unheard. And of course, it's like those model. It's totally unfamiliar, or it's not an option for the arts. So that's what actually we bring. So it's like in Documenta, for example, we invite or we involve or we network with I don't know, hundreds of similar initiative, mostly global South, who sort of like experimenting and sustaining with that model that it's happened, and we can learn from each other because it's very specific and locally rooted as well. That I wouldn't say Lumbung is just like one fits all, but like Maya, for example, in Mali, and then also so many Minga also in Colombia, for example, and so on. So like so many like I would say like pre-modern uh, uh, sharing model that is actually happens, and it works, and that's what we actually sort of like collect and then share it and then make this connection, which is actually happened until now. Of course, it's become big thing because in Documenta, for example, we not only represent that practice, but we actually try to change the whole model of how event as big as Documenta created. How, for example, artists can collaborate with other artists, and also the big institution like Documenta or like any other biennale, for example, or museum, like change their to become like more sharing, more collaborative, less exploitative towards arts and artists, for example, and so on. That's why it's actually because we sort of like installing the a different operating system rather than just like presenting the products of arts. Yeah.
Which is, I think, a very interesting issue because we are talking about like sustainability of movements, right? Organization and so on. And for decades, I've been what trained, to think like professionals, like having all these like. But now here we hear that people are actually using pre-modern, as you said, like resources from the past, no? Lumbung and all gotong royong, whatever you call it. But yeah, it's a different practice altogether, no? So it has well and kind of knowledge, no? So this is uh, interesting. And if we compare these like different organizations within the civil society movement, so to say, not necessarily that one is better than the other, but it works for some, it doesn't for others, perhaps. No, a little bit before we continue, can you?
what has, what has been changed in terms of resources for the like NGOs is in the past 10 years is that the funding agency is more bureaucratic. And uh, of course we've also support that kind of like ways to make this organization or NGOs being accountable, right, in terms of financially, because then you cannot shout for anti-corruptions if you then cannot be transparent. But also I think there's this thin line between being uh, have the autonomy to decide whatever you want to do and what is that important to you, and then to be dictated by the funding agency through now recently more thematic, right? Like everything is now talks about climate change. So the issue is how we can use this, like, or how we can piggybacking on what is now being trained, but also align with your own goals as a groups or as an NGO or as a organization. So, for example, like for Rujak, we usually will combine because I think the privilege of Rujak is that we do research, but we then can use the research to do advocacy. Because sometimes that's being disturbing is that you do research, but you cannot say more than that. So we usually combine different program to make sure that, for example, like we do research for with this program, and then we do advocacy for with that programs, making sure that the resources that we get, I mean, like the materials, the we can advocate it through other programs to make sure that it is always continuously, not stop in each program, right? That can make us frustrated, because if you just walk, partially to different, and how you can connect everything and make it more comprehensive. And also we are now trying to challenge that by working with each others rather than competing funding with each others, right? So now, like for example, like Rujak now has been collaborating with different NGOs, aiming for one program, and then of course there's a challenge because we've used to work with different approach, uh, different vision probably, but no, usually when we collaborate, we know that these are like quite similar in terms of vision, but we do have different strategies. So that's the things that we have done to discuss with along the program, is how we can find common strategies among ourselves and then to achieve our goals. And also in terms of being more accountable, transparent, now more NGOs, like for UJAC, we've been increasing numbers of accountants, for example, in the past year. We've been very diligently like paying taxes and everything, because it seems like I like to be anarchist, right? But like you cannot do that, because then now we have this kind of like how do you call it, like controlling from the state through different NGOs through taxes. So they will run after your taxes. If you have problems with your taxes, then they will have issues to discuss with you. And then that there's one NGOs that has been being intimidated by the state through that kind of loophole. So we don't want to provide that opportunity to the state to control us. So we try at best being accountable, but at the same time we challenge the system. For example, like we have this like one funding organization that requires all the evidence like for expenses through like more like modern one, like through Grabs or Gojek with all the receipt. Well, at the same time we work with the urban poor, where you don't have receipt, and I will send emails to them, challenge them, like you cannot support programs or activities working with urban poor with the urban communities, with the informal sectors, if you require such kind of like very strict evidence. The idea is that if you trust us enough, that we are, of course, we will be accountable as we can, but we cannot like being, forced to be very, strict in every aspect. And that's an ongoing, always back and forth between us and the funding organization. And also, uh, I think now what is important is to stick to our roots, like what is important for us. For example, like for Rujak, we know if we aim for like climate change, what is important, not just like, of course we do research for fun, also like for the sake of research, but we know that this is the things that we can advocate. For example, like the elderly. Now there's the issue on elderly. Actually, it has received like many support. Like we have really groups every 2 weeks, and then we have more participants to join because they thought it is now important to talk about elderly and the urban areas and urban heat. And for example, like we still focusing advocacy in housing and security of tenureship, urban land urban reform. Then we try our best to convince the funding agency that we do things our way. For example, like the last time we received collaborations in terms of housing upgrading. When we collaborating with the urban pool network, they have their own ways to do things, right? For example, like the funding agency wants specific areas. We will give you the money if you help the company improvement in this particular, because this is like the poorest in the neighborhood. We don't want them to decide, because we know it is up to this urban network to decide which kampung. So what happens is that they create like competition among the kampungs, like the urban network. They create competition where each kampung, the cooperative should like present proposals, like why our campus need to get this program, and they decide among themselves. It is not us. We don't have anything to do for that. But then the funding agency question my decision, our decision, and we then argue that if you want to work with them, we have to respect their ways, and that's how we keep, yeah, being autonomy in within what we thought it is principle, and then being more flexible in things that we can negotiate. I think that's what we've been doing now.
Right. Thank you. Um, now, yeah, I invite questions, or if you want to share your experiences, you're most welcome. Silakan.
So thank you, Pak Hilmar. So my name is Andrew. I have questions to Ibu Dian. So I'm from SMACBU, part of Surbana Jurong Group. So we are one of the consulting firm in Indonesia, and we are currently submitting our expression of interest to do the master plan of giant seawall of PT SMI with a special assignment from the Ministry of Finance. So you mentioned about giant seawall, and you mentioned about your work in advocating coastal communities. So I wonder, like, what will be your recommendation on how the master plan should be built by incorporating this aspect, the coastal urban communities, and also in regard with the social aspect and regard with the maybe climate change or environmental aspects.
So Rujak have been strongly advocate against the giant seawall in a way, because has like we come to the conclusion it's not necessarily the best solutions yet to address. There's so many issues about land subsidence, the flood, etc. etc. And in terms of like lacking of space, we now advocating for densifications of the cities rather than expanding our areas and up to like conquering the seas. But I understand what you point, but then how we can, like, if you want to make a master plans, what is the best ways? So recently, Rujak has been asked by Dinas Sumber Daya Air from Jakarta's governments to help them to design the sea not seawall, apa namanya, sea embankments, apa namanya, tanggul pantai, right? Because based on our research back in 2023, when we did the research about the impact of climate change to coastal communities, we've learned that for the locals, the sea embankment, the apa tanggul pantai is actually benefiting them because it's helped them from the flood. But the problem is what has been built until today is impoverishing the urban poor, because the way they built the walls is basically blocking the fishermen, the people who live in the coastal areas, to the sea, their livelihoods. And it's not necessarily adapting the way they live. For example, some of them are the green mussels fishermen, so they have the like a spots where they work on the green mussels, and it needs certain areas, right, which is not facilitated by these walls. So the government wants to build this and then ask for UJAC's help to making sure that the people follow the program. So what we do is that we would like to collaborate with you as long as you allow us, not allow, you agree that we do things with the communities. So we do the planning with the communities, the NRW 22 in Muara Angke, where we do like community planning in with 11 RT, and then the idea and the design now able to, so they have 5 typology of walls to accommodate people. For example, walls that in the mangrove area, walls in the green mussels area, walls where the boats can apa namanya, penggedokan kapal. So basically it's accommodating people's livelihood. Because if you plan something without acknowledging their livelihood and facilitating their livelihood, what happened is, if you want to see the new documentary movie by Watchdog and UI, I think Ibu Sarai Afif, they create this movies called Zona Batas. It also show how these walls in Kalibaru and Cilincing basically impoverish the people because they basically block people's access. So people have to build their organic stairs with the woods just to be able to climb to see the sea, and then it's really hard for the fishermen. So our design now will be auctioned by the government this year, and hopefully will be built next year. But the idea is to make sure that the design that produced by the people is the design that built by the government. So I think for your projects, I would suggest that it's important to really listen to what people needs, because if we don't facilitate that kind of needs, then I don't think we can call it development at all.
Thank you. I have a question for Dian and also Pade. You, both of you, in your sort of description of the work that you do, emphasize the idea of the neighborhood and the kampung, right? And there have been sort of two sides to the kampung, even in urban areas historically. One is a very sort of collective self-help idea, civic space idea, but the other one is a heavily state-managed idea as well, right? So in Indonesia, these spaces that are typically civic spaces have been managed quite heavily by state presence or presence of, trying to manage it through things like ERTE, airway, that can play a role in, helping people organize, but also then become enforcers of state policy when it comes time to do something official. Can you, both of you, talk a little bit about your interactions and how, with ERTE and airway, who are often elected, at least in Jakarta, they are in some ways. And how have you found their sort of cooperation in trying to sort of bring out the more civic side of things versus official?
So the one when we collaborating now with the one with the sea embankment project in Moranke is with the local and the formal RT, because it's airway 22 and some RT. And then we are now also working with one airway in Cimanggis. It's next to the Waduk Cimanggis, also with the local airway. Though we have been working also with the informal leaders in the communities through the urban poor network. I think we cannot, I mean, through my experience, what I see is that it's not like a dichotomy between these two, because it's kind of like a blended. There are some local leaders join the urban poor network who are part of these formal structures, like in Kampung Muka, where we are now doing this upgrading for 10 houses. The organizers, who's the leader of the cooperative, is also the LMK. LMK is like local parliament, right? So the one kelurahan, LMK. So he's very formal leaders, but he's also part of this cooperative who work for the communities to be legalized. So I think, but it is true. It is this local leader that being addressing by the governments, get support from the governments. They get money, for example, and also this is where the governments channeling their program. But throughout also in the past 10 years, JRMK also has been trying to uh, interfering that kind of structures by also running for the candidate. But it's not easy, especially like in Muara Baru. Most of the leaders, the RT, are male because very patriarchal society. The only woman that can be RT is the daughters of the former RT. So it's not necessarily because just like right dynasty. So yeah, so it is not easy to take that kind of power, but it is also important. So for the urban poor network, they've been trying to get that kind of power, but it's not really. I mean, like if you in the campus, there's no boundaries between what is informal leaders and formal leaders. They all have this same needs, collective, but also very individual interests, and it's all like blended into one. And yeah, kind of sometimes it's really tricky how to address what, for example, like we have the informal leader who are part of the head of the cooperative who are now become the head of LMK. So he became the formal one, and for him, maybe it's kind of different experience because he's not he's no longer rebel, right? He's part of the formal structures, and it gives him like sense of authority, and it's good for him. But we also like feeling like we're losing someone in the community because he's become not part of our semesta universe, right? Because he's now being privileged and everything. But yeah, I mean, like we waiting until he's finished with his term and maybe return to the cooperative. But yeah, it's always like blended relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, it's relationship. Yeah, it's funny relationship always. Uh, I think uh, after 98 it's really, really different because before 98 I think especially with art expression it used to be it's pretty vertical, people against the states. I think after 98 or like after 2000 it's really become horizontal. Your censorship or like your censor alarm is not only from the state representative, it's actually from your neighbors. Like so many artist groups or art events is actually being warned or being I call it maybe persecuted. It's harassed. It's actually by the neighbors, but that's why I think being an artist who have a certain infrastructure in a certain neighborhood, it needs a certain skill. It's not artistic skill; it's actually a social skill, and that's another which I think it is become artistic strategies in a way because like exactly what I mentioned before, how the necessity built, how the relevancy built is actually coming from the within where you live. That one thing, and then the other one is actually. Mm, I think in Jakarta, I mean, like in my experience, it's less. At least in my experience, it's actually less a state sort of control or less political compared to, let's say, I mean, as we know, in Jakarta, we only vote for governor, but not the rest, compared to, let's say, friends in small town in West or in the central Java, for example, like the political I call it fights is actually go through governor, mayor, like bupati, kepala desa, and so on. Like so, like I don't know how many times they vote, but like the friction, it's really like really in the, and it's also families. It's compared to Jakarta, it's like really more connected. So it's if I talk to other friends' experience in different city or like than Jakarta, it's actually how they move immediate have immediate impact in a smaller political scene. While we, for example, in Jakarta, it's less. but it's actually more impact on the capital or corporates capital tendency. Let's say gentrification, for example, the raise price of the land suddenly. Like we were in Tebet area, for example. I don't know how many years. It's like from 2003 until 2015, several times. We moved from there because it's totally unlivable. It's we cannot afford. We cannot afford to rent our space there anymore. Now it's totally like a little or like maybe bigger than Kemang, but it's like it's totally, totally, totally expensive. So our enemies, so called, quote, it's different again, which basically also incorporate or like collaborate with the with kecamatan, with RT and RW and so on. In that like like in that sense more and uh like but to see ourselves as a virus in 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 the certain area, we usually do a simple Indonesian way of nasi tumpeng diplomacy. Just like a like get together and get some food together, and then that's actually how we start to introduce our practice and so on, and then the friction will come after that, and the negotiation and so on.
I would like to add something. It's also, I remember, it's also interesting in terms of relationship. Like the cooperative is very democratized, right? So there's no hierarchy. Even you are the head of the cooperative, you are like equal because we have the same power. But with the formal structures, it's very formal. Formal. For example, like we just had this meeting with the maybe 2 weeks ago in the Chimangis, and then we spent 10 minutes at the first in the meeting. We spent the first 10 minutes for the sambutan, the welcome speech from the Ketua RW, Ketua RT, Ketua LMK. I was like, oh my God. Okay, okay. Well, we don't have that kind of process in the meetings with the cooperative. So it is very interesting also. And then it is interesting to see how they also adjust themselves. Like when they be part of the cooperative, they will very, yeah, casual. But when they are in the meeting within these airway structures, they will be formal. So yeah, it is interesting.
I'm struck by the difference between the first roundtable and this roundtable. The first roundtable was about 2 hours worth of closing civic space, state repression. We have to watch out because there's a lot of intimidation, acid being thrown at activists. This one, you haven't said any of that. It's all been about much more localized, new ways of integrating engagement with the community. It's as if you're living on two different planets, right? And so that's my question, right? The title of the session is Autonomy and Movement Infrastructure. It's sounding like you have a lot of autonomy, but now you have to think about movement infrastructure. Maybe you could say a little bit more about the general sense is I'm not in the activist community, but I'm married to it, right? And there does seem to be a general tenor of feeling like the state has gotten much more repressive. And yet what you're describing is actually much more embedded kind of movements where you do have scope. What you don't have is a single enemy to focus on, right? And some of the questions you were just raising about friction with the neighbors, when Warda was still doing UPC back in the day, she actually did have to worry about the police coming to our house and the police breaking up the riots. It wasn't so much about the cooperative happening. And the same is true of artists. They would actually go to jail. Now it's a matter of being embedded and finding a new creative energy seems to be the big question. So I'm just puzzled to why is there such a big gap between the two round tables when we're trying to think about strategic commonalities. Thank you. Very interesting, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, like, I used to work with UPC for 3 years. So when I joined Rujak, we still like anchoring with the interests of the urban poor and how to fight for their uh interest in terms to be not to be evicted. And I think in the past, and it's very local, right? I mean, like our level is Jakarta and the national government. For Jakarta, in the past like 7 years, maybe no, now 8 years. Like during Anis, they've been good relationship between the movement and his terms and his regime. Therefore, a lot of improvements in the kampungs. But after Anis stepped down, now we are back in the same situations. We have no guarantee. There's no clarity. There's no insurance that we will, and there is no rooms for alternative approach. My dissertation is focusing on this repertoire of strategies. So we've been doing demonstrations, lawsuit, trying to design like alternative design against forced eviction, and it's really hard to channel that. That's why back when I was in the UPC, that's the first time we decided to do political contract, right? And we're debating among ourselves because once you join the politics, you become coopted by the politician. But we then thought it's also a strong boundaries between us and activists and the urban poor, right? We are an activist. We still have the freedom. We still have the house. We still have the luxury of living not in the precarious life. But for them, it is their interest. So we didn't agree. Okay, we try political contract because it is important for the people to have someone in the power to support our proposals against eviction. And we try actually the first time with Jakarta with Adang Durojatun in 2007, but he lost against Foke, and then eviction continues. We try in different cities in Makassar. We won the election because the urban poor network in Makassar able to organize 6,500 voters to vote for Ilham, and then he support the movement, but it's more like relationship, good relationship, not yet in substantiates into policy. And we've support back in 2012, which people were evicted back in 2015. We support on the national, and then get back step. So I mean, like we've learned throughout this process, and then with Anis, people, I mean, the movement learned so much from the lesson from the process in the past 10 years. They make it more like legal. So we get support from legal aid, from Gentera, where they draft like really tight contract, 19 pages of kampung representative, 16 kampung representative, and Anis and Sandiaga Uno signed this contract. Of course, we all know it's not like legal documents because it's not like it's this political statement. That's when the struggle start. They basically bombarded Anis in his house, in City Hall, like forcing him to fulfill his promises. Which I interviewed him for my research. I asked his motive, like why you support the kampungs, and he has his own personal reasons because he grew up in the kampung area, blah blah blah. But he also wants to use his power to promote something alternative because there are alternative against evictions, right? We don't have to evict. There are many ways not to evict people, but we've never tried that. Like, and I think what we need is to support from the governments to try that. There are other possible ways. Since 2020, some of us form coalition. We call it Koalisi Perumahan Gotong Royong. We've been advocating national governments because we thought, okay, the design is coming from them, the public housing, the financing scheme for, because in terms of housing, the urban poor who are part of decile 1 to 3, those who live in formal settlement, is the one who doesn't get any program, because government program like now ARA, the Minister of Housing, just announced, oh, we improved the numbers of BSPS, Bantuan Stimulan Perumahan Swadaya, where they give money like 20 million rupiah for improvement and 40 million rupiah for built housing. But the problem is it requires clean and clear, meaning all the kampungs that are not clear in terms of spatial planning, not clean in terms of legal status, will not get the program. And they cannot also apply for any program require bank support because they're not bankable. So we've been advocating to national government, to Bapenas, Kemenpera, all the ministries, related ministries, to convince them there are ways through housing cooperative. That's why we promote housing cooperatives, that you can channel the money and it becomes like a subsidiary organizations that become the guarantee. And actually, we receive good response. there will be two pilot projects, one in Jakarta, one in the Jogja, but still blocked by the local government. So it's always between these two, right? Sometimes we get the support from the local, not yet the national. Now we get support from the national, not yet the locals. And it's always like back and forth. And sometimes it's really depressing because the last election, the presidential elections, is really hard for the poor. For example, like we can say like, oh, you have to be very critical, but for them, it's like everyday needs. And when we call serangan pajak, when they get money, we always thought, right? Why can't these people just receive the money and then choose what they want? But it cannot be like that because it's very like local communities. So because I have like community leaders receive money like 3 million rupiahs, she has to convince her neighbors to elect one candidate, for example. They cannot just lie, no, because they somehow those who order this will know who's not choosing who, and for them it's kind of like pressures. So they still, of course, they did the money, so they receive the money and they they choose. So it's really hard for the urban poor nowadays. They've been really frustrated. Fishermen communities now even believe in harta karun apa sih kok treasures huntings because they expect yeah in the sea or they're fighting against each others to get apa namanya apanya paus apa yeah apa bukan lure because it's for the skincare. So they really like even like believe in that kind of things because they're really desperate. And I think as an activist, but also a big privileged activist, like working in NGOs, I always will support whatever the movement choose. For example, like when the movement signing up the political contract, of course, there's a lot of critics, right? You no longer being autonomist, we become the children of Anis, all of that. But I fully understand their decisions because for them it is about whether or not our kampung is being evicted. So if you're asking like whether we've been threatened, of course I don't think we've been threatened. I mean like of course we've been monitored, but not necessarily like I've been monitored once in when I was in UPC, but not at Rujak. Rujak is I think perceived more apa friendly organization by the government. So, like, but I think for the poor, it's still even worse because we are still in the same condition. We don't have no channel to anyone, and national government doing everything completely opposite what we propose. So we've been campaigning saying koalisi perumahan gotong royong. Suddenly the government have project gotong royong housing. And we have the koperasi perumahan and they have koperasi merah putih. So it's actually a lot, like similar, but not similar. So it's been frustrating. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for artists it it works differently as because it's in the head. It's in the head. It's expression. It's imagination, right? And I think like the doers censorship will be self censorship, and that's what happened actually. And self censorship is not only I mean it works because it's not expressed yet. You know, like censorship when let's say films or like visual arts when it's produced it exists and then it's banned, for example, a book or banned, but at least it was out there and then it's banned. But like I think like the worst is actually self-censorship. But that's actually what happened now. And the push and pull it happens, you know, for some musician get catch in the West Java, for example, like Sukatani, let's say. I think like those events it creates a collective memories, you know, like if you if you express in certain ways this will happen. It actually give examples for others. So it's not like before 98 when when artists or like poets get just like gone and never come back. It's not like that, but it's actually there. You know, I don't I don't. It's just like different way. It's I would say smarter because it's push and pull. It gives you example, but it's in the head. You know, like That one thing, and then police intel. I mean, it's there always. Like it's they're our pelanggan. They are our regular regular visitors. Like we just know them, and they know us as well. And sometimes we have chat. It's like a so it's like it's just different relationship, but it's there still. Like it's in the head, and I think for us who like our goal is sort of like one of our goal is creating a space for expression in a certain neighborhood. It's also works differently, because it's more organic. It's more coming from relationship rather than expanding. Like it's slow. Like for example, we have now majelis sayur in it's vegetable majelis or vegetable assembly that's actually connects let's like several more than 10 urban farmers in the neighborhood using idle lands in the neighborhood. So those kind of stuff, like it's really become rooted, and I think like the best expression will be that that art that cannot get caught, actually. I would say.
Hi everyone. My name is Aun. I work for a donor-funded program in infrastructure, and I work particularly on urban mobility, urban transport. And as we know that the government of Jakarta is capable and already planned to expand their services, their public transport services to the outskirts of Jakarta. But there is a challenge or issue where the informal angkot managed by local cooperatives rejected the plan and the idea of the public transport expansion. Um, well, on the other side, that residents are expecting or demanding less traffic congestion, safer public transport, more affordable services. Um, it's very challenging to implement this kind of plan. I'd be grateful if you could share some insights from both of you on how to deal with these kind of situations with the local communities.
I think one of the principles that, and how do you spell it, Henry Lefebvre? Like, yeah, Melody, the right to the city idea is that we have to accept different form of living, right? Like including informal living, informal sectors, informal ways of living in the cities. And I think once you accept that notions, then we always, I'm not saying that we have to welcome, but we acknowledge that there are ways of how people living differently, including they come up with different type of transportation, like informal, like the angkot or beca, right? And I would say that it actually can be useful for different type of groups, right? I mean, like I mean, like the idea, the ambitious or the aspirations to create this global city requires us to become more formal, right? Like formal system is better than others, but I think informal also helps in a way that it gives also security to certain groups that don't have access to formal structures. Or otherwise, we can use the way that where the Jaklingko, for example, Jaklingko or uh, is one of the example where you can incorporate the informal uh, angkot or transportations into the formal systems, right? But it's always there are always still trayek that challenge that, like 26 number others like who still like this is our rules, and I don't think we should force that into them. I think the idea of I don't know whether this is the right examples like KTV. Now the government has this konsolidasi tanah vertikal, right? Addressing because cities are lacking space, so it's better to improve the areas with the vertical designs. But I mean, it's good things that the governments acknowledge that we have these missing middles historically, because we are grounded. We used to live in like 1 story, 2 story houses, and then up jump into like 20 stories apartment. We don't have these middles levels like in European cities. But even if you want to do that now with the KTV, the idea is you 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 have to convince people that they don't have nothing to lose, right? They don't have some, like, whatever they have as an asset is being appreciated, in is being acknowledged, it's been compensated, and that is still lacking in the KTV system or this transport. I think if you can convince the angkot that whatever the scheme that we have is only bring more profit to you than the opposite, people will. I don't think people will reject the ideas. I think what people scared is that they will losing a lot. Like the one that we organized in Muara Angke is that mixed type KTV. The idea is to make sure that what people have is being counted and being compensated. For example, the idea is KTV is that, oh, this is slum, so we have to fix it by not remove, but improve the settlements into, let's say, 5 stories, 8 stories buildings, and have apartment side by side, because this is the one who funded the project. But then people will thought, oh, I'm losing my asset. I used to have 2 units of houses, one which I rent. Now they only compensate me with 1 unit. Nobody wants that. So what we have in Moranke is to really like we collectively decide size of the unit, like 22, 24, 28. And if you say like your house is 25 meter squares, which is you still have 1 meter squares, you will not lose it. The 1 meter squares will be compensated into the units owned by the cooperative, where you get the result by the end of the year through SHU. So when people thought, okay, I'm not necessarily losing everything, they will see it as a solution. I mean, of course, with the pressure, because otherwise we'll get evicted. So we have to find ways that it's like missing like middle ground. But I think that's the same thing with the angkot. We're just now doing research in the secondary cities like Tegal, Weleri, Kendal, and the same problems. We will have visit from people from Tegal next week to Jakarta, and then some of us, oh, maybe we should show them like MRT, LRT, and KRL. Of course, it's good, but it's completely different scale. The one that really mimicking their spatial is the angkot or the apa namanya Transjakarta with the feeder. So I think people have to be shown that there are possible ways, but of course it requires a lot of things like many angkot in Tegal or in these small secondary cities doesn't necessarily have support, right? Because it is like, do you know that the bupati, bupati in these cities is actually the owner of the bus, like Dewi Sri, like they apa pengusaha angkutan. So I think it's interesting if the local government can invite them, within the process, right? I mean, like, why don't you just collaborate with them, right? They can be the providers, and then somehow you create the scheme that they will not losing their business. I think that's what they've been afraid of, right? That is why there's no public transportation in this small city. Of course, about the budget for sure, but also how to incorporate the informal one. Yeah. I hope I answer your question.
Yeah, I think it's I tried. Yeah, it's tough actually. Tough question. Maybe like infrastructurally, because the thing is, we always have problem with the urban planning. It's like it's always like we always feel like urban planning is like coming very very late. It's like almost impossible. Like for example, Jakarta, like it's almost impossible. People have to, like the traffic jam, the public transport. People have to travel a lot from where they live to where they work, right? It's not like a districts. It's almost impossible to change that right now. And maybe in the smaller town can be like design that it's actually like more spreads of economic center, for example. But that is not the case for Jakarta. It's just like it's almost impossible. Like people from Cibubur have a office here, and like it's like so it's but that one thing for that's like really maybe to spread the centers is actually one way. But if I see it from the cultural point of view, we have also I don't know now, like 20 years ago, we have a project called Apartment Project actually. So we put artists into doing artistic research in two different vertical living, and the finding is actually really interesting because like for most people there, vertical living is actually a transit. So house for them it's never vertical. It's actually it should be on the ground. So it's like home or house for us is actually something that touches the earth. So it needs, I don't know, it needs culturally, maybe it needs a few other generation to maybe, I don't know, maybe faster because of the lacking of the space, but it needs, yeah. And also, like for example, the finding, it's also quite interesting. Many times if you go up, it's actually more expensive, but not here. It's actually when you're closer to the ground, it's actually more expensive. So it's in the vertical living logic, it's we have really totally upside down. So it actually means the also with machine, like if you see transportation like motorbikes, like the vocabulary of movement for motorbikes is actually a vocabulary of people walking rather than motorbiking. If we make a list of how motorbike move in the city, it's actually representing walking rather than motorbiking. You know what I mean? Like for example, naik ke trotoar, it's a walking act rather than a motorbiking act. Also, ngelawan arah itu apa istilahnya? Ngelawan against the route, for example. Go to the jembatan penyeberangan, let's say. Like all these things are. I was like maybe once I was like thinking like maybe we never actually motorbiking. We actually still. I mean, we drive motorbikes, but our body is actually still walking. I mean, like two motorbikes driver talking to each other. That's not evil. It's not. It's not even run logic. It's actually a walking logic. You cannot even talk to each other while you run. That's actually a walking behavior. So maybe we never actually motorbiking. We still walk. I mean, this is actually a challenge of. I did once also research on how people move in the city. Like most of the bus stop is actually never works. When the bus design can stop everywhere and anywhere and anytime, bus stops is actually useless, right? So this is actually not only urban design, but it's actually designs which should be rooted, should be seeing like how people behave, how culturally, bodily people behave with each other, and also with the space, with the earth. So I think our design should be challenged by that logic, rather than just like copying, how it looks. Like it should be bus stops, but there should be a system in itself. I remember first week of people in KRL, when it's become a tap system. Uh, remember like the old campaign for people to queue, I remember Fai. Bebek aja bisa ngantri, ya nggak, tulisannya gitu kan, trying to campaign like a civilized, you have to queue online, right, in line. But then I remember like a first week it was like jam, like you cannot walk, and then like another week, next week, people just in line. So actually system or design can actually, there's no campaign, there's no propaganda, there's no things, but like design actually solve. Design is actually architecture is actually really can be fascistic towards how we behave. Like now in this room, for example, we behave in this certain way because of the design as well. So it's like, yeah, so it's a challenge of design culture. Yeah, it's a social design on that as well.
About the mobility, I think one of the major keys also about the urban planning for sure, the densifications of the cities, and then we've been campaigning for that, but we also, I mean, like have these problems about the cultures that rooted, right? Yeah, because we are claiming that we are collective society, but in terms of property, we are very individual, and then it's also part of neoliberalism, of course, but also we're also very rooted to the ground. Just like Mas Ade, I did also research in the apartment where people thought when I asked what is your future housing, it's grounded housing, either in kampung or in complex, but it's never been an apartment. And even we tried the first public housing rusun ya in Jakarta is Klender, Perumnas Klender and Kebon Kacang. Now Yurjak is doing research about decolonizing housing, and then we look. It's very interesting. They bought this because it's a you own it as a rusun through Bank Papan Sejahtera as a KPR since 1984. Now they own it, but the problem is the right to live, the HGB will be finished, will be ended in 2030. The question is, do they have money to repair the buildings? And they don't have money because they never save money as a collective. They live in the buildings, but with the sense like this is my unit. I don't have to save money because this is my house. I paid for it. So it's very interesting, like cultures, because we still see like it's our house. So remember when we deal about our house is very private. Like when we do research about the impact of climate change in the coastal communities, one of the issue is land subsidence. Many of houses has their their jendela, their windows become doors because it's already like sink. And when I asked like how much money it requires to fix it to improve your level, it's a lot, like 5 million per room. So if you go to Muara Baru, you will see houses will have different level. It actually shows their different economic capacities. And then when I asked like, have you ever like collectively saving money to improve the house for to deal with the sinking? They never, because it's very private. Like you don't want to talk about your economic capacities to your neighbors. Of course, neighbors know that whether you have money or not, but you don't want to proclaim it that you have financial capacities. So there's things like we're a collective society, but at the same time, we have things that are very private. We don't want to share about our own weakness or others, of course, other than gossiping, but like but still it's like so it's really challenging to campaign for densification because it's not yet changed.
I may I may add something to your question. I think similar to your question before. The last thing that you want to do is to try to fix the community so that your whatever project you are trying to implement will work, right? I remember when early 2000s, so when the new labor unions were formed, I played a role in the industrial arbitration on behalf of the unions, of course. No, and the manufacturing industries, Nike, Adidas, etc., having problem because so many labor strikes and so on, right? And LBH at that time was like playing that role of providing that forum for that. And it's interesting because like once you are in a formal setting, yeah, unions like there's no way for them to agree on anything, right? So we had several meetings. It lasted for like a month or so. Then we changed the route a little bit. I brought the managers of the companies to the labor neighborhoods, like the kampung of them, to see how they actually live, to build an understanding. This is the problem. So they are not making things up, but it's something like a real concern that they have. And they simply want a solution to that. Also, they're not asking, but if you put them in a position like a negotiation, like formal thing, And they were not unionized for decades, right? So they don't really have that knowledge, like how to kind of like propose things, etc., etc. Now, so difficulties like formulating what they actually want. Yeah, aspiration is there; they know what they want, but it's difficult for them to formulate that, to articulate that. So there's this question of and we just heard that it's really a cultural thing, right? I mean, it's like prejudice, like suspicion, whatnot, right? So it might work if like projects, the owners, um, yeah, try to kind of like engage in a way, with the local communities before they even start to think about like negotiating about anything, and the other way around. I mean, let the communities also look from that perspective. Why is the transport, etc., needed? What benefits do they get, right? Before starting a negotiation process. That's my experience. Well, yeah, doesn't always work, but at least then you can find a way to kind of like start conversation, yeah, rather than sitting in a meeting, a town hall meeting, and then ending up like a shouting bout, right? It's like, I'll never agree on anything. So yeah, and land disputes is also the same. Yeah. More questions or responses to? Feel free. We give the opportunity. Yeah, please.
Right. Thank you. My name is Jetro, and I do have a question regarding. Yeah, I agree with what you said before about the in the poor urban communities. They're more interested in um, issues that give them their immediate needs. Like that's why the programs like Bansos and nowadays the free school meal programs also target them intensively. And so, what I would want to know is um, how what would be the best way to not only raise their awareness but also encourage them to um, participate in criticizing the nowadays more modern issues like for example youth unemployment and also energy transition because like right now from what I see the government uses not only repressive methods but also more subtle ones like using um, personal based narrative to downplay the critics or arguments, and also like what I said before, using programs that seemingly addresses their immediate needs, but that's not the core of the issues. I think because these urban communities, urban poors, needed to be quote unquote invited to criticize these modern issues. So, in your opinion, what would be the best way to encourage them to also participate?
I mean, like through to saving groups in the past and now cooperatives, what we've been working with the communities is how we think about the futures, right? We envision about the futures. What is our goals? Like to have security of tenure, but it's a long, of course, and it's really hard to keep focusing on the long terms if your current need is not being fulfilled. That's why, for example, like the cooperative try to solve, at least we are useful. I mean, the cooperative useful for its member for the daily needs. That's why, for example, like we have this relationship with the farmers from Kendeng to buy the rice directly from the farmers, basically to help the not to help, yeah, because the price of oats cheaper for us in the kampungs, and for the farmers they have more, they have the higher selling price, right? Because there's no tengkulak in between. And why it is important? Because that's what we've been, I mean, like the cooperative keep telling the members or the pengurus, we have to be useful for the members. Like they have like sembako apa shops, right? Making sure all the eggs is cheaper. But recently they get a scam. They want to do business on X, but they get scammed. But it's all like it's like to show that how they want to be very useful. And now the cooperative even have this insurance. So they give 10 million rupiah for the family who lost the family members who died. So it's they try to be very useful. And I was even asked them like, do you actually have the money? Like now even the insurance company will have all this, a string to make sure people will not claim the money, right? But for them, it is necessary to be accountable to your members. For if your members died, then you have to compensate them like as a contribution, like 10 millions. And where the money and how you create this criteria, it's not about the age, but it's about whether it is active participants, whether they also like part of the movement. And in terms of like energy, like I just recently learned from Kampung Aquarium, for example, they do you know the program the movement of jelantah wijen minyak jelantah, so they will collecting minyak jelantah where it's not about money because they don't exchange it into money, they just give it to the cooperative and the cooperative sell it and the cooperative get the money where they collecting the money to Jumat Berkah. So every Friday they can get like 500,000 rupiah to make food for the people who pray in the neighboring mosque or for the elderly in the kampungs. And so the idea of that they are paying for others in the neighborhood through their movement of saving the environment with the plastic waste, with the minyak jelantah waste, it actually is already progressive, right? Because they're fully aware that it's not about them getting the money, but they contributing something to the neighborhood. And I think always the balance between aiming for the long term goal like security of tenure and solving the immediate issues. For example, like either we used to have the problem like the children that living in the kampungs, mostly they don't have birth certificate in the past. If you don't have the birth certificate, you cannot enroll to the elementary school. So when UPC was established back in the early 2000, the one of the advocacy that they did was to fight for the acknowledgement for these children that living in the illegal settlements to be acknowledged by the state. Therefore, they can enroll to the schools, and it becomes like a movement. So I think solving the immediate issue is still a thing because that's what the cooperative for. Now even the cooperative have 10 groups anggota kelompok 10 where they will discuss like daily problems and they will consult it to the cooperative and they will do things. For example, like recently the Jakarta government's in the process of changing the water company apa namanya PDAM into Perseroda, meaning like more like private companies. Means that they will increase the price of the water, the services will be allocated for the, we still have now 64% area Jakarta service and the other 36 is still doesn't have pipeline. So considering that we will be privatized, then the movement have this rally to the governor office, to the city hall, to the parliament, making sure that the basic issues is being advocated. So it's like between the current needs and the long term needs always.
From the hotline. Semacam itu.
Yeah. Hi, my name is.
Yeah, it's a it's a question to Ade. I just read it out. Yeah. Hi, my name is Andika from Greenpeace. Apologies, I'm unable to open the microphone due to the heavy rain here. Question to Ade. In this media infrastructure, which is dominated and demands a presence in social media plus censorship and restriction here and there, do you envision a type of alternative media infrastructure that can deliver a message from the artist? Given the effectiveness and efficiency of exposure to the public, social media probably has plus points in this current information circulation infrastructure. So basically, do you envision like a different type of media in this like highly saturated media, censorship, repression, and whatnot?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Wow, that's a tough one. I mean, like first, maybe walkie-talkie. Yeah, social media. Yeah, maybe first like use social media in different way. Maybe that's one thing. I mean, like before the alternative one, because like I mean, like I grew up without social media. I grew up with like to make art public or to make expression public is like through exhibition or public real in a like a public art, or like graffiti, street arts, intervention in public space, like performance art and so on, really in public with the real uh, uh, experience and so on. But I can see like many more artists like using social media as well, and that's uh, to see it as something that it's really because it's uh, you cannot control actually. I mean, like you feel that it's actually democratic or democratized media, but it's actually not. There's algorithm behind it and so on. So yeah, please don't see it as it's actually a free ride a media. Uh, but of course you can inject it with a certain message and so on. What I see like really interesting is actually like not only putting it as a streets really like as something that uh, not only like one message like spontaneously, but really social media, seeing it social media as really as a media. I mean, as the artist can kind of like have a long trajectory and really strategize towards the content, for example, and conceptually really modeling in that, so that actually what I see more and more, not only as a gallery or like as a space to show or like to promote your work and so on, but really like to state things. So it's like really taking the tools and then also give the social media an agency role. So that's actually one thing. But actually can be also. I mean, like now, for example, I don't think we can see the media as just like one singular thing, like because it's just like one small piece of the puzzles, maybe of the whole message that we would like uh, to give. We need to have like other media as well. Like can be analog, can be like I think like zine, for example, or like printed materials. Even it's limited, but it's actually can have more like a different experience, different depth as well, different voice as well, and also radio actually now is getting either online or I think it's more and more, and then also internationally connected more and more. Like people are having more depth into the conversation, for example, to the issues and so on. I think one other thing is actually what I like, at least one thing about social media. I mean, like there is like now there's a lot of like also really quite in-depth knowledge, or like at least an in introduction door to go beyond that. Like I think we cannot expect that social media will sort of like solve immediate message, but at least it can trigger to for people to go beyond uh, 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 the other layers, like deeper layers. So I think like to see it like to see that is actually like really really different than a mainstream or like what we know as a conventional uh, media. And one thing again with social media, I think I mean it sounds like many, but it's actually just like one or two, right? it's still it's still quite maybe three or four, but it's still pretty much uh, uh, saturated, and then also it's really flashing. It's I don't know if people actually can remember. Uh, I mean, in the middle of scrolling, it's like information like really flashing and so on. So it's really like to expect that as a strategy, as like just like to get to the other layers is actually one I think is more important than just like really expecting that will give a certain like a deeper or like message like full, for the public. And I like the discussion more and more actually. When I see social media, actually I like to see the comments. I like to see the I like to see I like to see the discourses. I like to see like the dialogues. It's actually that's actually one thing that not always, but at least we can see like the people are talking or discuss things. I think that again one of the social media roles or position that we can actually exploit.
So add to that. Yeah, I think what also important is to make sure that we still maintaining these offline meetings or discussion as a core also, because I remember I mean you guys of I don't know whether you remember the Arab Spring, like, and then there's this movies in Netflix called Tahiri Squares, where all these the activists, the young activists, kind of like make a. I don't think that they claim, but they make statement that the use of social media that kind of like lit up the movements. But there's also a counter narrative by scholars. Her name is Salwa Ismail, lives in quarters, Cairo's quarters. Basically, she argues that the social media, the Arab Spring is actually cultivating the movements that has been there for the past 10 years, which requires meeting like in quarters, in kampungs, in like good school, every majalis, right? That's offline meetings that needed. Then of course we still need social media as amplifiers, but we cannot amplify something that is not there. So I think the need is also to make sure these the organic activities is still there and then stronger than before. Then once we get opportunities to amplify that through social media, then it becomes like Arab Springs. I'm not saying revolution, but like yeah, that requires those two. You cannot say that others is better than the other one.
Yeah. It's actually a very interesting topic. I mean, we are talking about like movement infrastructure. Think about the digital infrastructure. We've been like connecting through social media or different like internet and so on. And question really is like, how effective is it actually, and whether now it's much easier to connect, but does that translate to a more consolidated movement, or is it just like facilitating communication, but we are not actually getting closer? Yeah, I mean that's probably for later. Oh yeah.
Yeah, just I mean that's actually one thing that we've been also discussing with other friends. I mean, like many uh, agents or NGOs or activists. I think we can see also like it's very during the 25 years of University of Europa, we actually invite a lot of CSOs and really happy to together with them, and then also they actually really happy because it's like for the not for the first time, it's like not so often that it's actually meetings and also consolidates and also intersects and so not. I think it's been living in the bubbles, our own bubbles. I think we need to really aware of that, that we need to break that, and maybe again we need some infrastructure, or we need some we need some like a I don't know, maybe like events or like really physical spatial events that is actually can consolidate on the whole of those energy of critical thinking, rather than, of course, like we've been like busy in each our own activities, or but I think for some years you can see more and more that it's actually also separated, or like fragmented. I think it's really. I remember like during the synchronized, for example, it's really like many friends happy, because that's actually for to see or like to meet like the other publics, rather than like just like people that you know each other already, like I mean, like, why you talk with someone that already know the issues, like I think the public should be reached, and that's actually sort of like strategies, I think, like go out from talking about media. Is also like how it's actually always challenge this comfort zone, and then also really open, because I think that's actually the challenge of in the end of the day, like our practice.
Well, it's 2 minutes to 5, so we need to conclude session. So thank you very much, Ade and Diane. So this is a series, as I said. Like, this is the second session, and next week we will have the third session, and it's about like strategies. We will talk about like different methods and strategies that movements or activist groups employ. Policy advocacy, protest, demonstration, online campaign, and whatnot. Education, of course. And the speakers will be Inaya Rahmani. I mean, she's from the University of Indonesia. She's a lecturer there. And we will also have Siti Maimunah, my Jabing. She was the coordinator of Jaringan Aksi Tambang. Yeah, so lots of really confrontational things on the ground. But now she's like the head of Mama Aleta Foundation, a finance support actually organization for education in the eastern part of Indonesia. So be interesting panel. So of course you're welcome to come again. And yeah, thank you for coming for today.